The first time Thea Caldwell saw daylight in 3 days, it was through a gap in the canvas wagon cover. Dust and desperation filled her lungs as she peered through that sliver of the world outside her mobile prison. Spring of 1875 had never looked so cruel. Montana territory stretched before her like a vast, indifferent witness to her fate. "Get them girls ready," barked a voice that had become all too familiar during the journey. Silas Hitch, a man whose soul matched his name, dark, twisted, and capable of snagging innocent lives. Auction starts in an hour. Drummond's saloon is packed with men who ain't seen a woman in months. Thea pulled back from the gap, retreating into the darkness where 3 other women huddled. Their eyes had the vacant look of those who'd already died inside. Only 19 years old, Thea refused to join them in that spiritual death, though her body trembled with the same fear. "I won't be sold," she whispered, more to herself than to them. "I won't." Eliza, a woman in her 30s who had been kidnapped from a stagecoach, gave a bitter laugh. "You think you have a choice, girl. Men like Hitch don't give choices." "There's always a choice," Thea insisted, though her voice wavered. She thought back to the farm in Kansas where she'd grown up. After her parents died of fever last winter, her uncle had offered her a place to stay. His letter had promised work in his general store in Helena. The stagecoach journey had started hopeful until bandits attacked. She'd been knocked unconscious and woke up bound in this wagon with other captured women, headed for a fate she could barely comprehend. The wagon jolted to a stop. Boots crunched on gravel, approaching the back of the wagon. The canvas flap was ripped aside, flooding the space with harsh sunlight that made Thea wince. "Out," ordered Hitch, a weathered man with yellowed teeth and cold eyes. "Anyone tries to run, I'll shoot you in the leg. Won't kill you, but you'll still fetch a price, just less." One by one, they climbed down. Thea's legs nearly buckled beneath her after days of cramped confinement. She steadied herself against the wagon, taking in her surroundings. Drummond wasn't much of a town, just a collection of wooden buildings lining a muddy main street. The largest building had a swinging sign that read "Silver Dollar Saloon." Men were already gathering, eyeing the women like livestock. Thea felt sick to her stomach but forced herself to stand straight. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing her break. Hitch and his 2 companions herded the women toward the back entrance of the saloon. Inside, the air was thick with tobacco smoke, whiskey fumes, and the stench of unwashed bodies. A small stage had been erected at one end of the room. "Gentlemen," called out a portly man in a stained vest who seemed to be the proprietor. "As promised, fresh companions for your lonely nights. Auction begins in 10 minutes. The hoots and hollers that followed made Thea's skin crawl. She was positioned with the others behind a curtain, forced to wait as the anticipation in the room grew louder. "First up," the saloon owner announced minutes later, "a fine specimen from back east, knows her letters and can even play the pianoforte." Eliza was pushed through the curtain. Thea heard the bidding begin, numbers called out in an eager frenzy that ended all too quickly with the bang of a gavel and cheers from the crowd. One by one, the women were sold. Then it was Thea's turn. Shoved through the curtain, she stumbled onto the small stage. 50 or more men stared back at her, their eyes hungry and appraising. Some looked merely curious, others openly lustful. A few seemed almost apologetic, but not enough to leave. "Now here's a special treat, boys," the auctioneer bellowed. "Young, healthy, and spirited. Just look at that fire in her eyes. Who'll start the bidding at $20? 10, someone called out, drawing laughs. "Come now, gentlemen, don't insult me. Look at this fine girl. 15. Another voice shouted. 20, came a call from the back. Thea stood rigid, fighting back tears of rage and humiliation. She scanned the room, memorizing faces, swearing silent vengeance. $25, $30. The bidding stalled at $45. The auctioneer looked disappointed, 45 going once. "Don't let this opportunity pass you by, gentlemen. 45 going twice. You're worth my whole life." The voice cut through the smoky air, deep and clear. The room fell silent as heads turned toward a tall figure leaning against the back wall. He stepped forward and the crowd parted. A man in his late 20s with sun-bronzed skin and eyes the color of storm clouds. His clothes were trail-worn but clean denim pants, a faded blue shirt, and a dust-covered vest. A gun belt hung low on his hips, the wooden grip of his revolver worn smooth from use. "What's that you say, Tucker?" The auctioneer asked, confusion crossing his features. "Tucker." The name rippled through the crowd in whispers. Thea noticed how men shifted uncomfortably, some even backing away. "I said," Tucker repeated, walking slowly toward the stage, each boot fall deliberate on the wooden floor, "she's worth my whole life." "Well now," the auctioneer recovered with a nervous laugh, "that's mighty poetic, but the current bid is $45. You planning to top that?" Tucker reached the foot of the stage and looked up at Thea. Their eyes met, and something passed between them, a connection, a promise. "This auction is over," Tucker said, his voice carrying through the now silent room. "No one's buying this woman or any other here today." Hitch stepped forward, hand moving to his gun. "Now listen here," in a motion so fluid it seemed almost casual, Tucker drew his revolver and leveled it at Hitch. "No, you listen. This stops now." "You can't take on the whole room, Tucker," Hitch sneered, though he kept his hand hovering above his holster. "He ain't alone." Another man stood from a corner table, then another by the bar. Within moments, half a dozen men had positioned themselves around the room, all armed, all focused on Hitch and his companions. "Marshall know you're running slave auctions in his territory, Hitch?" Tucker asked conversationally, though his gun never wavered. "These ain't slaves," Hitch protested. "Just working girls. Doesn't look voluntary to me," Tucker replied. His eyes flicked back to Thea, who still stood frozen on the stage. "Madam, would you like to come down from there?" Thea found her voice at last. "Yes," she said, her word emerging stronger than she felt. She moved to the edge of the stage, and Tucker offered his free hand to help her down, his gun still trained on Hitch. "Tanner," Tucker called to one of his allies, "get the other women from the back. Jonesy, ride for the marshal." Hitch's face contorted with rage. "You're making a big mistake, Tucker. I got friends in high places." "So does the hangman," Tucker replied evenly. Thea stood beside Tucker now, aware that whatever happened next could still end badly. But for the first time in days, hope flickered within her. "This is a business arrangement," the saloon owner protested, mopping his brow with a handkerchief. "I paid good money to host this auction." "Then you can explain that to the marshal too," Tucker said. "Kidnapping women is still a crime in this territory, last I checked." The other women were brought out from behind the curtain, looking bewildered by the sudden turn of events. Tucker addressed the room at large. "Anyone here who came for the auction, I suggest you leave now. Anyone who stays will be considered part of this operation when the marshal arrives." The exodus began immediately, men streaming toward the doors, none wanting to be associated with what was clearly turning into a legal matter. Soon only Tucker's allies, Hitch, his men, and the saloon owner remained, along with the freed women. "What happens now?" Thea asked quietly. Tucker finally holstered his weapon, though his companions kept theirs ready. "Now we wait for the marshal. These men will face justice, and you ladies will be safe." "I have nowhere to go," Thea admitted, the reality of her situation sinking in despite her relief. Tucker's expression softened. "My ranch is a half-day's ride from here. My sister runs the house. There's work if you want it, honest work, until you decide what you want to do next." Thea studied him, searching for deceit or hidden motives in his eyes but finding none. "Why did you do this? Why risk yourself for strangers?" Tucker's gaze drifted to the window, toward the mountains visible in the distance. 3 years ago, my younger sister disappeared on her way to visit our aunt. We never found her." His eyes returned to Thea's, "But I never stopped looking for her in every face I see." In that moment, Thea understood the depth behind his earlier words. Not a romantic declaration, but something perhaps more profound, a recognition of the value of a human life, the worth of freedom and dignity. "Thank you," she said simply. The door banged open, and a broad-shouldered man wearing a marshal's badge strode in, taking in the scene with practiced efficiency. "Tucker," he nodded. "Jonesy filled me in. This Hitch's operation?" "Yes, sir," Tucker confirmed. "Been tracking him across 3 territories," the marshal said grimly. "Ladies, you're safe now. We'll need your statements, then we'll help you get where you need to go." As Hitch and his men were led away in chains, Thea remained by Tucker's side, uncertain of her future but for the first time in days unafraid of it. "That offer still stand?" she asked. "About your ranch," Tucker nodded. "It does, no strings attached. You can leave any time you want." "I'd like to accept then, at least for now." Tucker gave a small smile, the first she'd seen from him. "Then welcome to your first day of freedom, Miss Caldwell," she supplied. "Thea Caldwell." "Tucker Rylan," he returned with a slight bow of his head. "Pleased to meet you properly, Miss Caldwell." As they stepped out of the saloon into the fading afternoon light, Thea took her first deep breath as a free woman again. The mountains that had seemed so indifferent earlier now appeared to stand guard over the land, promising shelter rather than indifference. Tucker whistled, and a magnificent chestnut mare trotted up from the hitching post. "This is Penny," he said, patting the horse's neck. "She's gentle enough for two until we can get you your own mount." Thea approached the horse cautiously, extending her hand. Penny snuffled her palm inquisitively, then nudged her shoulder in a friendly gesture. "She likes you," Tucker observed. "I grew up around horses," Thea said, feeling a small piece of her former self return. "My father bred them on our farm in Kansas." Tucker helped her mount, then swung up behind her. The proximity made Thea tense briefly, but his respectful distance behind her and his steady hands on the reins soon put her at ease. As they rode out of Drummond, the marshal and Tucker's friends escorting the other women toward the jailhouse, Thea felt the first stirring of something she hadn't expected to feel again so soon. Peace. "It's a long ride," Tucker said, "but I think you'll find it worth it." Thea watched the town recede behind them, the weight of her ordeal beginning to lift with each hoofbeat. "I already do," she replied softly, meaning much more than just the journey. The trail to Tucker's ranch wound through stands of pine and aspen, crossing meadows where wildflowers painted the landscape in splashes of color. As they rode, Tucker pointed out landmarks and shared stories of the area, his deep voice rumbling behind her. He spoke of the mountains by name, as if they were old friends, and identified birds that darted across their path. Thea found herself responding, first with simple questions, then with stories of her own. She told him about Kansas, about her parents and their small horse farm, about the fever that had taken them both within days of each other last winter. "My uncle's letter came like a gift," she said. "A fresh start in Montana Territory, working in his general store in Helena." She sighed. "I never made it there, obviously." "Your uncle will be worried," Tucker observed, "if he even knows I'm missing. The stagecoach company might have reported the attack, but," she shrugged, "we weren't close. He's my father's brother, but they hadn't spoken in years." They crested a rise, and Tucker reined Penny to a halt. "There it is," he said, pointing to the valley below. "Rylan Ranch," Thea gasped softly. Nestled against the backdrop of pine-covered hills sat a large two-story home built of sturdy logs, a barn nearly as big beside it. Several smaller outbuildings clustered nearby, and fenced pastures stretched across the valley floor where horses grazed. Smoke curled from the chimney, and even from this distance, Thea could see figures moving about, signs of life and industry. "It's beautiful," she said honestly. "Started with just a one-room cabin," Tucker told her, pride evident in his voice. "Built it up over the last 8 years. My father left me some money when he died, enough to buy the land. The rest we've done ourselves. We, my sister Tilly and I. And our hands we employ 6 men year-round, more during branding and roundup. We raise cattle mainly, but horses are my passion, working on developing our own line." They rode down into the valley as the sun began its final descent behind the mountains. As they approached the ranch, a woman emerged from the main house, shading her eyes against the setting sun. Even from a distance, Thea could see the family resemblance, the same straight posture, the same watchful stance. "Tucker." The woman called, hurrying down the porch steps as they rode into the yard. "Wasn't expecting you back until," she stopped short, noticing Thea. "Hello there." Tucker dismounted first, then helped Thea down with steady hands at her waist. "Tilly, this is Miss Thea Caldwell," he said. "Miss Caldwell, my sister Matilda Rylan." Tilly was perhaps a few years older than Thea, with the same storm gray eyes as her brother but lighter hair pulled back in a practical braid. She wore a simple dress with an apron tied over it, and her hands, though feminine, showed the calluses of regular work. "Welcome to Rylan Ranch," Tilly said, her curious gaze darting between Thea and Tucker. "Though I suspect there's a story here I haven't heard yet." Tucker nodded grimly. "There is. Miss Caldwell needs a safe place to stay for a while. I offered her work here if she wants it." Understanding dawned in Tilly's eyes. Without hesitation, she stepped forward and took Thea's hands in her own. "Then you're welcome here as long as you need, Miss Caldwell. Any friend of my brother's is family to me." "Thank you," Thea said, tears unexpectedly springing to her eyes at the simple kindness. "And please call me Thea." "Thea it is," Tilly smiled warmly. "You must be exhausted. Come inside, I've got stew on the stove and fresh bread cooling." Tucker excused himself to tend to Penny, and Tilly led Thea into the house. The interior was surprisingly refined for a frontier home: polished wooden floors, comfortable furniture, and shelves lined with books. A large fireplace dominated one wall of the main room, where a cheerful fire crackled. "It's not what people expect when they hear ranch house, is it?" Tilly said, noticing Thea's admiring gaze. "Tucker insisted on building something that would last generations, and I insisted it be comfortable." She showed Thea to a bedroom on the second floor, a clean, airy space with a real bed, not just a cot, covered with a handmade quilt. A washstand stood in the corner with a pitcher and basin, and curtains framed a window that overlooked the valley. "Take your time getting settled," Tilly said. "There's water for washing up, and I'll see if I can find you some fresh clothes. We're about the same size, I think." Left alone, Thea sank onto the edge of the bed, overwhelmed by the sudden turn her fortune had taken. This morning, she had awakened in a wagon, bound for slavery. Tonight, she would sleep in a real bed in a beautiful home, surrounded by people who, despite being strangers, had shown her more kindness than she'd known in months. She washed her face and hands, wincing at the dirt that came away. Her reflection in the small mirror above the washstand was almost unrecognizable, hollow-cheeked, with dark circles under her eyes and her once shiny chestnut hair dull and tangled. A soft knock at the door preceded Tilly's return with a stack of folded clothes. "These should fit well enough for now," she said. "Dinner will be ready whenever you are." Thea changed gratefully into the clean dress. It was simple but well made, of soft blue cotton that felt like luxury against her skin after days in the same filthy clothes. She did her best to tame her hair, tying it back with a ribbon Tilly had provided. When she descended the stairs, she found Tucker and Tilly in the kitchen, along with an older woman who was introduced as Mrs. Whitaker, the ranch's cook and housekeeper. Sit, Mrs. Whitaker urged, setting a bowl of fragrant stew before her. "You're nothing but skin and bones, child." The meal passed in comfortable conversation, with Tucker and Tilly sharing stories of ranch life that drew occasional smiles from Thea. They asked no questions about her ordeal, for which she was grateful, though she knew the conversation would come eventually. After dinner, as Mrs. Whitaker cleared the dishes, Tucker leaned forward, his expression serious. "Thea, I need to ride to Helena tomorrow. I'd like to send word to your uncle that you're safe, if you'll give me his name and the location of his store." Thea nodded. "Thomas Caldwell, Caldwell's General Goods on Main Street, according to his letter. I'll find him," Tucker promised. "And I need to speak with the territorial judge about Hitch and his men. The marshal will hold them, but proper charges need to be filed." "Will I need to testify?" Thea asked, her stomach clenching at the thought. Tucker's expression softened. "Eventually, yes, but not right away. The statements given to the marshal yesterday will suffice for now." "I'll go with you," Thea said suddenly, surprising herself as much as the others. Tucker shook his head. "You should rest, recover." "I need to face this," Thea insisted, "and I should speak to my uncle in person. He may be my only remaining family." She paused. "Besides, sitting here alone with my thoughts won't help me recover." Tilly reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "She's right, Tucker, and I'll be here when you both return." Tucker studied Thea's determined face for a long moment before nodding. "All right, We'll leave at first light. It's a full day's ride." That night, Thea slept fitfully despite the comfortable bed. Nightmares plagued her hitch's leering face, the wagon's suffocating darkness, the auction block. Each time she woke gasping, only to be soothed by the unfamiliar sounds of the ranch, the distant lowing of cattle, the soft whicker of horses in the barn, the gentle creak of the house settling. Before dawn, she rose and dressed in riding clothes till he had provided practical trousers, a cotton shirt, and a vest. She braided her hair tightly and made her way downstairs to find Tucker already in the kitchen, drinking coffee while Mrs. Whittaker packed provisions for their journey. "Good morning," he said, a hint of surprise in his voice. "You're up early." "I'm ready to go," Thea replied simply. Tucker nodded, handing her a mug of coffee. "Drink this, it's a long ride." By the time the first rays of sunlight touched the mountaintops, they were already on the trail, Thea riding a gentle gray mare named Cloud that Tucker said needed the exercise. The horse responded well to Thea's commands, confirming Tucker's assessment of her riding skills. "You sit a horse like you were born to it," he observed as they rode side by side along the trail. "My father taught me to ride before I could walk," Thea replied, a genuine smile touching her lips at the memory. "He always said there was nothing a horse couldn't teach you about life if you paid attention." "Wise man," Tucker said. "What kind of horses did he raise?" "Quarter horses mainly, strong, dependable animals for farm work. But he had a weakness for thoroughbreds, had 2 mares he'd saved years to buy. I used to exercise them every morning." Her smile faded. "I had to sell them after he died, the farm too." They rode in companionable silence for a while, the rhythm of the horses' hooves a soothing backdrop to Thea's thoughts. The landscape changed as they traveled, forest giving way to rolling hills and eventually to the flatter land surrounding Helena. As they approached the outskirts of the territorial capital, Thea felt anxiety rising within her. The streets were busy with wagons, riders, and pedestrians going about their business, ordinary life, continuing as if her world hadn't been shattered and remade in the span of days. "We'll go to your uncle's store first," Tucker decided. "Then to the courthouse." They left their horses at a livery stable and proceeded on foot down Helena's main street. Caldwell's General Goods was easy to find, a large storefront with a freshly painted sign. Through the window, Thea could see shelves stocked with goods of all kinds, from tools to fabrics to foodstuffs. Taking a deep breath, she pushed open the door, the small bell above it announcing their arrival. A balding man in his 50s looked up from behind the counter where he'd been tallying figures in a ledger. "Be with you in a moment," he said absently, then did a double take as his eyes fell on Thea. "My God, Thea, is that you?" Thomas Caldwell came around the counter, his face a mask of disbelief. "We thought you were dead. The stagecoach company sent word of the attack. No survivors, they said." "Not dead, Uncle Thomas," Thea said, her voice steadier than she felt, though it was a near thing. Her uncle embraced her awkwardly, then stepped back, noticing Tucker for the first time. "And who might this be?" Tucker introduced himself with a tip of his hat. "Tucker Rylan, sir. I had the fortune of meeting your niece in Drummond." Thomas Caldwell's eyes narrowed slightly. "Drummond. That's nowhere near the stagecoach route." "Perhaps we should sit down," Thea suggested, gesturing to a small seating area at the rear of the store where customers could rest while their orders were filled. "It's a long story." Over the next half hour, Thea recounted her ordeal, the stagecoach attack, her kidnapping, the days in the wagon, and finally the auction in Drummond. She spoke matter-of-factly, omitting the worst details, but making clear the danger she'd faced. Throughout her tale, Tucker remained a silent, supportive presence beside her. Her uncle's face grew increasingly pale. "My dear girl," he said when she finished, "how terrible. If I'd known, I would have searched for you myself." "You couldn't have known," Thea assured him, "and thanks to Mr. Rylan, I'm safe now." Thomas turned to Tucker, extending his hand. "I'm in your debt, sir, deeply." Tucker shook the offered hand. "No debt. Anyone would have done the same." "But they didn't," Thomas pointed out. "You did." He turned back to Thea. "You'll stay with me now, of course." I have rooms above the store, not fancy but comfortable enough for a bachelor and his niece. Thea hesitated, caught off guard by the assumption. That's very kind, Uncle Thomas, but Mr. Rylan has offered me work at his ranch and I've accepted, at least temporarily. Her uncle's bushy eyebrows rose. Work? What kind of work? Honest work, Tucker interjected smoothly. My sister runs the household and could use help, and given Miss Caldwell's experience with horses, she'd be an asset to our breeding program. Thomas studied Tucker with new interest. You breed horses? Among other endeavors, Rylan Ranch is one of the larger operations in the territory. This information seemed to satisfy something in Thomas Caldwell. I see. Well, the offer to stay here stands, Thea, your family, after all. Thank you, Uncle, Thea said sincerely. I may take you up on that someday, but for now, I think the ranch is where I need to be. She didn't fully understand her own reluctance to stay in Helena, except that the open spaces of the ranch had already begun to heal something in her that the confines of town might not. They spoke a while longer, with Thomas filling Thea in on his life in Helena and asking carefully edited questions about her journey west. Finally, Tucker mentioned their need to visit the courthouse before it closed for the day. Of course, Thomas said, rising. But you'll come back before you leave town. Perhaps dine with me this evening, Thea agreed, and they took their leave, walking the short distance to the courthouse. Tucker was known to the clerk, who directed them immediately to Judge Harmon's chambers. The judge was a formidable man with a shock of white hair and piercing blue eyes that seemed to evaluate everything they caught. He listened intently as Tucker explained the situation, and Thea provided her testimony. Hitch has been a thorn in the side of law enforcement across 3 territories, Judge Harmon said when they finished. We've suspected this kind of operation, but without victims willing or able to testify, proving it has been impossible. He turned his keen gaze on Thea. You understand what will be asked of you if this goes to trial, Thea nodded. I'll need to testify to face him again. Yes, and it won't be pleasant. Defense attorneys can be persistent in their questioning. I understand, Thea said firmly. I'll do whatever is necessary to see him punished. The judge nodded approvingly. Good. The other women who were rescued, will they testify as well? The marshal is working with them, Tucker said. Some had been captive longer than Miss Caldwell. They're more traumatized, but I believe at least 2 others are willing to testify. That should be sufficient, the judge said, making notes. I'll issue the formal charges today. The trial will likely be set for next month. I'll send word to Rylan Ranch when we have a date. As they left the courthouse, the sun was beginning its descent toward the western mountains. The air had cooled and the streets were less crowded as businesses began to close for the day. We should get back to your uncle's store, Tucker said, then find lodging for the night. It's too late to start back to the ranch today. Thea nodded, suddenly weary as the emotional toll of the day caught up with her. They walked in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. Dinner with Thomas Caldwell was a subdued affair at a small restaurant near his store. He asked more questions about the ranch and Tucker's background, seeming to warm to the man as the meal progressed. Your father was Samuel Rylan, Thomas asked at one point. I believe I met him years ago when he came through Kansas City on cattle business. Could well have been, Tucker acknowledged. Pa traveled extensively building our herd, started with just 50 head and built it to over 2,000 before he died. Impressive, Thomas said with genuine respect. He turned to Thea. Your father would approve, I think. He always did value hard work and honest enterprise. After dinner, Thomas embraced Thea more naturally than before. Visit when you can, he said, and if you ever need anything at all, you know where to find me. Tucker secured rooms for them at a respectable hotel near the livery stable, separate rooms with a connecting door that remained firmly closed. Thea was grateful for both his consideration and the privacy. Despite her exhaustion, sleep eluded her once again as her mind replayed the events of the past days. Near midnight, unable to lie sleepless any longer, she wrapped a shawl around her shoulders and slipped out onto the small balcony attached to her room. The night air was cool and clean, the stars brilliant above Helena's rooftops. A soft sound from the neighboring balcony startled her until she realized it was Tucker, similarly unable to sleep. "Couldn't rest either?" he asked quietly. "Too many thoughts," she admitted. He was silent for a moment then. "It's like that sometimes. After my time in the war, I'd go days without proper sleep. The mind doesn't quiet easily after seeing certain things." "You fought in the war?" Thea asked, surprised. "Last 2 years. Joined up at 17, though I told them I was 18. Saw things no boy should see, came home different." The simple admission created a new bond between them, the understanding of those who have faced darkness and survived it. "Does it get easier?" she asked. "The memories, I mean." Tucker considered this. "Not easier exactly, but less immediate, like an old injury that aches when the weather changes but doesn't cripple you anymore." They stood in companionable silence for a while, watching the stars wheel slowly overhead. "Thank you," Thea said finally. "Not just for the rescue, but for treating me like a person with choices, not just a victim to be pitied." Tucker's profile was thoughtful in the starlight. "Everyone deserves choices, Thea, even when it seems like all choices have been taken away." He paused. "When I said you were worth my whole life, I meant it. Not just you specifically, though you're certainly worthy of that regard, but what you represent: freedom, dignity, the right to choose your own path." The depth of his conviction moved her. Here was a man who lived by a code, who believed in something greater than himself. "I should try to sleep," she said after another comfortable silence. "Long ride tomorrow." "Indeed," Tucker agreed. "Good night, Thea." "Good night, Tucker." The journey back to the ranch the next day was easier, as if a weight had been lifted from both of them. They talked more freely, sharing stories and observations about the land they passed through. Tucker pointed out a family of deer at the edge of a meadow, and Thea spotted an eagle soaring high above. "What will my duties be at the ranch?" Thea asked as they rode. "Whatever you're comfortable with," Tucker replied. "Tilly could use help with the household accounts and correspondence. She has a good head for business, but little patience for paperwork. And if you're willing, I'd value your opinion on our horse bloodlines. A fresh perspective from someone with knowledge could be invaluable." "I'd like that," Thea said, genuinely pleased at the prospect of working with horses again. They arrived at the ranch as sunset painted the mountains gold and crimson. Tilly greeted them warmly, eager to hear about their journey. Over dinner, they recounted their meetings with Thomas Caldwell and Judge Harmon. "So you'll need to return for the trial?" Tilly asked Thea. "Yes, probably next month," the judge said. "We'll all go," Tilly decided. "You shouldn't have to face that alone." The simple offer of support nearly undid Thea's composure. "Thank you," she managed. In the days that followed, Thea settled into life at Rylan Ranch. True to his word, Tucker introduced her to their horse breeding operation: 20 broodmares and 4 stallions, carefully selected for their speed, endurance, and temperament. "We're trying to develop a horse that combines the best qualities of several breeds," he explained as they walked through the pasture where the mares grazed with their foals. "Speed from thoroughbreds, stamina from Morgans, intelligence from Arabians, and the cow sense of quarter horses." Thea knelt beside a leggy chestnut foal, running experienced hands over its legs and back. "Good bone structure," she observed, "and a deep chest for lung capacity." Tucker watched her with undisguised appreciation for her knowledge. "What else do you see?" Thea moved to another foal, this one a bay with a white blaze. "This one's shoulder angle is excellent. He'll have good extension in his stride, but his pasterns are a bit long, might make him prone to injury on rocky ground." "My thoughts exactly," Tucker said, clearly impressed. "You have a good eye." Thea blushed slightly at the praise. "My father taught me to look past prettiness to functionality. A beautiful horse that breaks down is no use to anyone." "Your father sounds like a wise man. I wish I could have met him." "He would have liked you," Thea said, surprising herself with the certainty of it. Their eyes met for a brief moment before Thea looked away, suddenly flustered by the warmth in Tucker's gaze. As promised, Tilly also put Thea to work on the ranch's accounts and correspondence. The sisters-in-law of 2 of the ranch hands came 3 times a week to help with laundry, cleaning, and preserving food. but the management of the household fell to Tilly. "I never realized how much business is involved in running a ranch," Thea commented one afternoon as she helped Tilly organize orders for winter supplies. "Most people don't," Tilly agreed. "They see the romantic side cowboys and cattle drives. They don't see the ledgers and supply lists and constant calculations to make sure we survive until next season." Thea found she enjoyed the work, both with the horses and the household. The physical labor left her pleasantly tired each night, and the mental challenges kept her mind from dwelling too much on her ordeal or the upcoming trial. She also found herself increasingly drawn to Tucker. He was unlike any man she'd known before, thoughtful, principled, and possessed of a quiet strength that never needed to announce itself. He treated everyone with the same respectful attention, from the youngest ranch hand to the oldest neighbor. And she wasn't blind to the way his gaze followed her, or how he found reasons to be wherever she was working. Their conversations grew longer, deeper, ranging from practical matters of ranch management to philosophical discussions of books they'd both read. One evening, about 3 weeks after her arrival at the ranch, Thea was returning from the barn after checking on a mare about to foal when she encountered Tucker on the path to the house. "Any signs?" he asked, falling into step beside her. "Not yet, but soon." "She's restless and her flanks are sweating. I told Diego to check her every hour through the night." They walked in comfortable silence for a few moments. "I received a letter from the judge today," Tucker said. "The trial is set for 2 weeks from Monday." Thea's steps faltered slightly. "So soon? They want to proceed while the witnesses' memories are fresh. Are you prepared for this?" Thea took a deep breath. "As prepared as I can be. I know what I need to say." They had reached the porch of the main house. Rather than going inside, Tucker gestured to the bench that sat facing the valley. "Sit with me a moment," Thea nodded, settling beside him as the last light faded from the sky and the first stars appeared above the mountains. "There's something I need to tell you," Tucker said, his voice serious. "Something about my past that you should know before the trial." Thea turned to face him, concerned by his tone. "What is it?" Tucker's gaze remained fixed on the distant horizon. "Before I built this ranch, before the war even, I rode with a rough crowd for a time. Nothing like Hitch and his men," he added quickly, "but not entirely on the right side of the law either." He paused, and Thea waited patiently for him to continue. "I was young, angry after my mother died. My father and I didn't get along. I left home at 16 and fell in with some men who made their living moving cattle across territory lines without asking too many questions about ownership." "You were a rustler?" Thea asked softly without judgment. "For about 8 months, until we were caught." Tucker's hands clasped together tightly. "The others went to prison. I was given a choice because of my age: jail or the army. I chose the army, served my time, came home changed." He finally turned to look at her, his expression vulnerable in a way she hadn't seen before. "Hitch's lawyer might bring it up at the trial, try to discredit me as a witness. I wanted you to hear it from me first." Thea considered his words carefully. "We all have pasts, Tucker. What matters is who you are now, not who you were at 16. Relief washed over his features. "That's generous of you." "It's not generosity, it's truth." Thea hesitated, then added, "You gave me a chance at a new beginning. How could I do any less for you?" Something shifted between them in that moment, a deepening of trust, a recognition of shared understanding. Tucker's hand found hers on the bench between them, his calloused fingers warm against her skin. "Thea," he began, his voice low and earnest, "I know you've only been here a short time and you're still healing from a terrible ordeal. I don't want to rush you or presume anything. But I find myself thinking about you more than is probably proper." Thea's heart quickened. "I think about you too," she admitted. Tucker's eyes searched hers. "Would it be all right if I called on you, properly I mean, with Tilly as chaperone, of course?" The formality of the request, so at odds with the rugged rancher before her, brought a smile to Thea's lips. "I'd like that very much." The relief and joy that transformed his face made Thea's breath catch. For the first time, she allowed herself to fully acknowledge the feelings that had been growing since that day in Drummond. Not gratitude, not merely friendship, but something deeper, something with the potential to change her life completely. "It's getting cold," Tucker said, though he made no move to release her hand. "We should go inside." "In a minute," Thea replied, reluctant to end the moment. "The stars are beautiful tonight." They sat together a while longer, hands joined, watching the night sky deepen above the valley that was slowly becoming home. The next 2 weeks passed in a blend of daily ranch work and preparation for the trial. Thea met with the prosecutor, a sharp-minded woman named Margaret Wilson, who had been appointed specifically for cases involving crimes against women. "It's unusual, Mrs. Wilson explained during their meeting at the ranch, but Judge Harmon believes that female victims deserve a sympathetic ear and male prosecutors often lack certain insights. Thea appreciated the woman's direct manner and clear explanations of what to expect in court. "Hitch's lawyer will try to undermine your credibility," she warned. "He might suggest you went willingly or that you misunderstood the nature of the gathering. Don't let him rattle you. Stick to the facts as you experience them." True to his word, Tucker began courting Thea properly. On Sundays, their one day of rest from ranch work, he took her on rides to his favorite spots in the surrounding hills: a hidden waterfall, a meadow carpeted with wildflowers, an overlook with views that stretched for miles. Tilly always accompanied them, though she often brought a book and sat at a discreet distance, allowing them some privacy while maintaining propriety. During these outings, Thea learned more about Tucker's past, his childhood on the ranch his father had started, his strained relationship with the stern Samuel Rylan, his time in the Army during the war's bloody final years, and his return to find his father dying of consumption. "He left me the ranch in a letter," Tucker told her as they sat beside a small lake high in the hills. "In it, he said he was proud of the man I'd become, despite our differences. I'd spent years angry at him, only to discover at the end that he'd loved me all along, just didn't know how to show it." "That must have been both healing and painful," Thea observed. "It was. I promised myself then that if I ever had children, they'd never doubt my love for them. I'd tell them every day." The simple statement and the future it implied sent warmth spreading through Thea's chest. In turn, she shared more of her own story, happy memories of her childhood in Kansas, her mother's gentle wisdom, her father's patient teaching. "They wanted me to marry the neighbor's son," she confided. "A nice enough boy, but dull as dishwater. I couldn't imagine spending my life with someone I couldn't have a real conversation with." "And what kind of man could you imagine spending your life with?" Tucker asked, his tone light but his eyes serious. Thea met his gaze steadily. "Someone honest, kind but not soft, someone who sees the world clearly but doesn't become hardened by its cruelties, someone who believes in something greater than himself." Tucker's hand found hers, his touch now familiar and welcome. "I'm trying to be that man," he said quietly. "I know," Thea replied. "That's what matters." The night before they were to leave for Helena and the trial, Thea found herself unable to sleep. She wrapped a shawl around her nightdress and made her way downstairs, intending to make a cup of tea. To her surprise, Tucker was already in the kitchen, staring into a mug of something steaming. He looked up at her entrance, a soft smile forming. "Couldn't sleep either." "Too many thoughts," she said, echoing her words from that night on the hotel balcony. Tucker nodded in understanding. "Tea," he offered, gesturing to the pot on the stove. "Please." He poured her a mug and they sat across from each other at the kitchen table, the lamp between them casting a warm glow in the otherwise dark house. "Are you worried about tomorrow?" Tucker asked. "Yes," Thea admitted. "Not about testifying. I know what I need to say. I'm worried about seeing him again." "Hitch," Tucker's jaw tightened. "He can't hurt you anymore. He'll be in chains, surrounded by guards." "I know that here," Thea tapped her temple, "but here," she placed a hand over her heart, "I still feel afraid." Without hesitation, Tucker reached across the table and covered her hand with his own. "Fear is natural after what you've been through, but remember, you won't be facing him alone. Tilly and I will be there. Your uncle too," he said, "and Mrs. Wilson," Thea added, drawing comfort from the reminder of her supporters. "And every honest person in that courtroom," Tucker affirmed. Courage isn't the absence of fear, Thea. It's feeling afraid and doing what needs to be done anyway. Thea turned her hand to clasp his. How did you become so wise, Tucker Rylan? A rueful smile touched his lips. Not wisdom, just hard-won experience. He hesitated, then added, There's something I want you to know before tomorrow changes everything. What is it? That day in Drummond, when I said you were worth my whole life, I meant it as a statement of principle. Every human life has value beyond measure. His eyes held hers intently. But now, knowing you, I would say those words and mean them in an entirely different way. Thea's breath caught. Tucker, you don't need to say anything, he assured her quickly. I know it's too soon and there's the trial ahead and 1,000 other considerations. I just wanted you to know that whatever happens in Helena, my feelings won't change. Thea found herself at a loss for words, overwhelmed by the depth of emotion between them. Instead of speaking, she rose from her chair, still holding his hand, and moved around the table until she stood beside him. Tucker looked up at her, question in his eyes. Slowly, giving him time to pull away if he wished, Thea leaned down and pressed a gentle kiss to his lips. It was brief, chaste even, but filled with promise. When she pulled back, Tucker's expression was one of wonder and barely restrained joy. We should try to sleep, Thea said softly. Tomorrow will be a long day, Tucker nodded, rising to his feet. I'll walk you to your room. They climbed the stairs in silence, fingers still intertwined. At her door, Tucker raised her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles with reverence. Sleep well, Thea. And remember, whatever happens, you're not alone. Nor are you, she replied, the words feeling like a vow. The journey to Helena the next day was subdued, all three travelers lost in their own thoughts. They arrived by mid-afternoon and checked into the same hotel as before. Thomas Caldwell joined them for dinner, his concern for Thea evident in his fussing over whether she was eating enough and if she felt prepared for the ordeal ahead. I'm fine, Uncle, she assured him repeatedly. Nervous but ready. The courthouse was crowded the next morning. News of the trial had spread, and many were curious about the man accused of kidnapping and attempting to sell women. Thea kept her head high as she walked down the center aisle to the front row of seats reserved for witnesses, flanked by Tucker and Tilly, with Thomas following close behind. Judge Harmon entered, and the proceedings began. Mrs. Wilson presented the case against Silas Hitch with methodical precision, establishing the pattern of kidnappings across 3 territories and the attempted auction in Drummond. When Thea was called to testify, she felt a moment of panic as she approached the witness stand. Her eyes inadvertently found Hitch, seated at the defense table in chains, his face twisted in a scowl. For an instant, she was back in that wagon, terrified and helpless. Then her gaze shifted to Tucker in the front row, his expression steady and supportive. Drawing strength from his presence, she took the oath and seated herself. Mrs. Wilson led her through her testimony gently but thoroughly, drawing out the details of her kidnapping and the days that followed. Thea spoke clearly, her voice growing stronger as she recounted the auction and Tucker's intervention. "And did Mr. Hitch ever indicate that you were free to leave?" Mrs. Wilson asked. "No, he threatened to shoot anyone who tried to escape. Did you go with him voluntarily?" "I was unconscious when they took me from the stagecoach. I woke up bound in the wagon." When the defense attorney rose for cross-examination, his approach was exactly as Mrs. Wilson had predicted. "Miss Caldwell, isn't it possible you misunderstood the nature of the gathering in Drummond? Perhaps it was merely an employment opportunity for women seeking work in establishments where male companionship is." Compensated, Thea's chin lifted. "It's not possible I misunderstood being kidnapped, bound, threatened with death if I tried to escape, and then displayed on a stage while men bid money for me." A murmur ran through the courtroom, and Judge Harmon gavelled for silence. The defense attorney tried several more angles, suggesting Thea had run away from home, that she had agreed to work for Hitch, that she was confused about dates and times. To each, she responded with calm clarity, never letting her temper flare despite the outrageous implications. Finally, the man shifted tactics, and this, rescue as you call it, performed by Mr. Tucker Rylan. A man with a criminal record himself, is that not so? Before Thea could answer, Mrs. Wilson was on her feet. Objection, Your Honor, Mr. Rylan is not on trial here, nor is his past relevant to the witness's testimony about what happened to her. Sustained, Judge Harmon ruled. Counselor, restrict your questions to Miss Caldwell's experience. Frustrated, the defense attorney tried one last approach. Miss Caldwell, you're currently residing at Mr. Rylan's ranch, are you not? Yes. And receiving compensation for services rendered. The implication was clear, and a flash of anger broke through Thea's composure. I am employed as a horse trainer and household manager, with a proper salary deposited monthly in the Helena Bank. My relationship with Mr. Rylan and his sister is that of employee and friend, nothing more. It wasn't entirely true, not anymore, not after that kiss in the kitchen, but it was close enough, and she wouldn't allow this man to sully what was growing between her and Tucker. No further questions, the attorney said stiffly. As Thea returned to her seat, Tucker squeezed her hand briefly, pride evident in his eyes. Other witnesses followed, two of the women who had been in the wagon with Thea, the marshal who had arrested Hitch, and finally, Tucker himself. He testified with the same quiet strength he showed in everything, describing how he had heard rumors of women being transported through the territory against their will and had gone to Drummond to investigate. His account of the auction and his intervention matched Thea's in all important details. When the defense attorney tried to bring up Tucker's youthful brush with the law, Judge Harmon again ruled it irrelevant. Frustrated at every turn, Hitch's lawyer could do little but try to poke holes in the timeline, which both Tucker and the marshal refuted with documented facts. By late afternoon, all testimony had been heard. Judge Harmon recessed court until the following morning for final arguments and his verdict. As they left the courthouse, Thea felt drained but relieved. You were magnificent, Tilly told her, linking arms with her as they walked. So composed, so clear. Indeed, Thomas agreed. I was proud to call you my niece today. Tucker said nothing, but his hand at the small of her back spoke volumes about his support and admiration. That evening, after a quiet dinner at the hotel, Thomas excused himself to return to his rooms above the store. Tilly, sensing that Tucker and Thea needed time alone, claimed fatigue and retired early, leaving them in the hotel's small sitting room. How are you, truly? Tucker asked once they were alone. Thea considered the question. Tired, relieved that my part is done, hopeful that justice will be served. She looked up at him. And grateful that you were there today. I'm not sure I could have faced him without knowing you were in that room. Tucker took her hand. You're stronger than you know, Thea. You would have found the courage. Perhaps, but I'm glad I didn't have to find out. She paused, then added softly, about what the defense attorney implied about us. You don't owe me any explanation, Tucker assured her. He was trying to discredit you, nothing more. But I want to be clear, Thea insisted. What I said was true when I first came to the ranch. It's changed since then. My feelings have changed. Tucker's eyes softened. Mine too, but there's no rush, Thea. Whatever is growing between us, it can develop at its own pace. You've been through so much. Don't treat me like I'm fragile, Thea said, more sharply than she intended. Yes, I've been through an ordeal, but I'm not broken by it. I'm still me, still capable of knowing my own mind and heart. Tucker looked chagrined. You're right, I'm sorry. The last thing I want is to make decisions for you or to assume I know what's best. Thea softened. I know you mean well, and I appreciate your respect for propriety. But Tucker, when I kissed you last night, it wasn't a moment of weakness or confusion. It was a choice, my choice. Tucker's thumb traced patterns on her palm. A choice I'm grateful for, he said softly, and one I hope you'll make again. Thea smiled. I imagine I will when the time is right. They parted soon after, both needing rest before the final day of the trial. As Thea prepared for bed, she felt a curious lightness despite the stress of the day. Speaking her truth both in the courtroom and to Tucker had freed something inside her, a burden she hadn't fully recognized until it was gone. The next morning, the courthouse was even more crowded. Final arguments were presented with Mrs. Wilson making a compelling case for Hitch's guilt based on the consistent testimony of multiple witnesses and the physical evidence recovered from the wagon. The defense attorney did his best with limited material, attempting to paint Hitch as a misunderstood businessman and the women as willing participants who had changed their stories when the enterprise was discovered. Judge Harmon was having none of it. After deliberating for less than an hour, he returned to the bench and delivered his verdict, guilty on all counts. Silas Hitch, the judge intoned, you have been found guilty of kidnapping, false imprisonment, attempted human trafficking, and conspiracy to commit these crimes. These offenses strike at the very heart of civilized society and cannot be tolerated in this or any territory. I hereby sentence you to 20 years hard labor in the territorial prison. A murmur of approval ran through the courtroom. Hitch's face contorted with rage as he was led away, still in chains. Outside the courthouse, Thea found herself surrounded by well-wishers, the other women who had testified, the marshal and his deputies, even strangers who had been moved by her testimony. It's over, Tilly said, hugging her. Really over? Yes, Thea agreed, though she knew that in some ways it would never be completely over. The experience had changed her, marked her. But standing in the sunlight with friends around her and Hitch on his way to prison, she felt the promise of healing more strongly than ever before. Thomas Caldwell approached, his expression solemn but satisfied. Justice was done today, he said, patting Thea's hand. Your parents would be proud of your courage, my dear. Thank you, Uncle Thomas, Thea replied, genuinely touched by his words. You'll come visit an old man sometimes. He asked, when ranch duties permit, of course, Thea promised, and you're welcome at Rylan Ranch anytime. As they prepared to leave Helena the next morning, loading their horses for the journey home, Mrs. Wilson approached them at the livery stable. Miss Caldwell, she said, extending her hand, I wanted to thank you again for your testimony. It made all the difference. I'm glad justice was served, Thea replied, shaking the woman's hand. There's something else, Mrs. Wilson said, her tone becoming more formal. The territorial governor has established a fund for victims of crimes like Hitch's. Each of you women is entitled to a portion as compensation for your suffering. She handed Thea an envelope. It's not a fortune, but it might help you establish yourself. Thea opened the envelope to find a bank draft for $500 more money than she had ever possessed at one time. I don't know what to say, she stammered. Say you'll use it well, Mrs. Wilson replied with a small smile, to build the life you choose, not one forced upon you. As they rode out of Helena, Thea felt the weight of the bank draft in her pocket, not just money, but possibilities. For the first time since her parents' death, she had options, resources of her own. You're quiet, Tucker observed as they left the city behind and entered the open country that would lead them back to the ranch. Just thinking, Thea replied, about the future. Tucker's expression grew guarded. The compensation Mrs. Wilson gave you, it changes things for you, doesn't it? Thea studied him, noting the careful neutrality he was trying to maintain. It gives me choices, she acknowledged. I could go almost anywhere, start almost anything with that kind of money. Tucker nodded, his eyes fixed on the trail ahead. You deserve that freedom. Thea guided her horse closer to his until their legs were nearly touching. Tucker, look at me, he turned, vulnerability clear in his eyes despite his attempt to hide it. I have choices now, Thea said softly, and I choose Rylan Ranch. I choose the life I've begun to build there. I choose. She took a deep breath. I choose you if you'll have me. The transformation of Tucker's expression was like sunrise breaking over the mountain's doubt, giving way to dawning hope, then to radiant joy. If I'll have you, he repeated, his voice rough with emotion. Thea, you're all I want. All I've wanted since that day in Drummond, though I hardly understood it then. Tilly, riding a few paces ahead, glanced back at them with a knowing smile, then tactfully increased her lead to give them privacy. I love you, Thea Caldwell, Tucker said simply. Not because I rescued you, not because you needed help, but because of who you are, your courage, your intelligence, your kind heart. I loved you before I even knew your name, when all I saw was a woman refusing to be broken by cruelty. Tears pricked Thea's eyes, but they were tears of joy, not sorrow. I love you too, she replied. Not out of gratitude or obligation, but because you're the finest man I've ever known. Because you see me and value what you see. They reined their horses to a halt, and Tucker reached across the space between them to take her hand. I want to court you properly, he said. To do this right. Thea laughed, the sound bright in the clear mountain air. You already are courting me properly, Tucker Rylan. And when the time is right, I expect you to propose properly too. Tucker's smile was dazzling. Yes, madam, I surely will. The return journey to the ranch seemed to fly by, the miles passing easily as they talked and planned. Thea spoke of her ideas for expanding the horse breeding program, using some of her compensation money to acquire new bloodlines. Tucker shared his vision for the ranch's future: more land, more cattle, perhaps even a school someday for the children of ranch employees and neighboring farms. And our children, if we're so blessed, he added, watching her carefully for her reaction. Thea's heart swelled at the thought. I'd like that, she said softly. Very much. When they crested the final rise and the ranch came into view in the valley below, Thea felt a surge of emotion. 2 months ago, she had arrived here a traumatized stranger, seeking only safety and temporary refuge. Now she returned as a woman in love, looking toward a future bright with promise. Welcome home, Tucker said, as if reading her thoughts. Home, Thea repeated, tasting the word, savoring its rightness. Yes, home. Life at Rylan Ranch settled into a new rhythm in the weeks that followed. Thea's position evolved from employee to partner as she invested some of her compensation money in the horse breeding program. Tucker insisted on drawing up proper papers, making her part owner of that aspect of the ranch operations. It's your expertise, your vision, he said when she protested that it wasn't necessary. You should have a formal stake in its success. Their courtship progressed in the open now, with Tilly's enthusiastic blessing. On Sundays after church, they would ride or walk together, sometimes picnicking in the meadows that were ablaze with summer wildflowers. In the evenings, they often sat on the porch, talking until the stars emerged above the mountains. True to his word, Tucker was patient, never pushing for more than Thea was ready to give. Their kisses grew more frequent, more passionate, but always within the bounds of propriety. Tilly served as chaperone when needed, though she often found reasons to make herself scarce, trusting them both to behave honorably. In late August, Thomas Caldwell visited the ranch for a week, his first real vacation in years, he claimed. He watched Thea and Tucker together with obvious approval, and on his last evening he took Thea aside for a private conversation. He's a good man, Thomas said, nodding toward where Tucker was showing him the improvements to the barn. Your father would have liked him. I think so too, Thea agreed. I've never told you this, Thomas continued, his expression growing serious, but your father and I had a falling out many years ago, over your mother actually. We both courted her, you see. When she chose him, I said things I regretted later. Pride kept me from making amends until it was too late. Thea stared at her uncle in surprise. I never knew. No reason you should have. But when I heard about your parents' passing, I knew I had to try to make it right by offering you a home. I'm glad now that things worked out as they did, even if the path was difficult. You found where you belong. He pressed something into her hand, a small velvet pouch. This was your mother's. I think she'd want you to have it now. Inside the pouch, Thea found a delicate gold locket. Opening it revealed a tiny daguerreotype of her parents on their wedding day, their young faces beaming with happiness. Uncle Thomas, she breathed, this is precious, thank you. He patted her hand awkwardly. Be happy, Thea, life's too short for anything less. 2 weeks after Thomas's visit, on a perfect September day, Tucker asked Thea to ride with him to the highest point on the ranch property, a ridge overlooking not just their valley but 3 others beyond it. The view was spectacular, mountains marching to the horizon in every direction, the afternoon sun gilding the autumn-touched trees. I wanted to show you something, Tucker said, helping her dismount. He led her to a clearing where, to her surprise, a foundation of stones had been laid out in a large rectangle. What's this? She asked, puzzled. Tucker took both her hands in his. This is where I'd like to build our home, he said, his voice steady but threaded with emotion. If you'll marry me, Thea's breath caught, our home, but the ranch house, is wonderful and has been home to Rylans for 2 generations, Tucker acknowledged. But I thought, Tilly and I, that you and I should have our own place. Not far from the main house, as you can see, but ours from the beginning. He gestured around the clearing. The foundation is already laid. We could start building before winter sets in, have it ready by spring. He paused, suddenly looking uncertain. That is, if you say yes. Thea looked from the foundation to Tucker's hopeful face, her heart so full she thought it might burst. You haven't actually asked me a question yet, she pointed out, her voice trembling with joy. Tucker laughed, then grew serious. Keeping hold of one of her hands, he dropped to one knee before her. Thea Caldwell, he said, looking up at her with eyes full of love, from the moment I saw you, you've been worth everything to me. My whole life, just as I said that day, though I understand that phrase differently now. Will you do me the great honor of becoming my wife? Yes, Thea whispered, then louder, yes, Tucker Rylan, with all my heart, yes. He rose and pulled her into his arms, their kiss sealing the promise between them. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Tucker reached into his pocket and withdrew a small wooden box. This was my mother's, he said, opening it to reveal a gold band set with a single perfect pearl surrounded by tiny diamonds. My father gave it to her when they decided to build the ranch. He said the pearl represented the precious new life they were creating together. As he slipped the ring onto her finger, Thea was struck by the symmetry, her mother's locket around her neck, Tucker's mother's ring on her hand. The past blessing their future. It's beautiful, she said, admiring how the pearl caught the light. And perfect. They lingered on the ridge until sunset, sitting on the foundation stones of their future home, planning and dreaming. Tucker wanted to be married before winter set in. Thea agreed, seeing no reason to wait. A November wedding, she decided, with pine boughs and holly for decoration, and we'll spend the winter in the main house while this one is being built. Whatever you want, Tucker promised. Though Tilly will insist on handling the wedding arrangements, I warn you now, Thea laughed. I'm counting on it. I know nothing about planning a wedding. As they rode back to the ranch in the gathering dusk, Thea felt a contentment so deep it seemed to reach into her very bones. The future stretched before them, full of promise and possibility. There would be challenges. Of course, life on the frontier ensured that, but they would face them together. Word of their engagement spread quickly through the territory. Congratulations arrived from neighbors near and far, from Thomas Caldwell and Helena, and even from Mrs. Wilson, who wrote that she was delighted to see compensation funds put to such excellent use in securing future happiness. Tilly threw herself into wedding preparations with gusto, ordering special fabrics from Denver for Thea's dress, planning the menu for the celebration, and sending invitations to everyone within a day's ride. Nothing too elaborate, Thea protested weakly. Nonsense, Tilly replied. My only brother is marrying the perfect woman. We're celebrating properly. As the weeks passed and November approached, construction began on their new home. Local craftsmen were hired, and Tucker himself worked alongside them whenever ranch duties permitted. The structure rose quickly, a spacious 2-story home of logs and stone, with large windows to capture the magnificent views. 4 bedrooms, Tucker said as they walked through the framed rooms one crisp October afternoon. For all those children we talked about. Thea blushed but squeezed his hand in agreement. And a library, she added, pointing to a room at the front of the house, with shelves from floor to ceiling. And a proper kitchen for you to teach our daughters your mother's recipes, Tucker continued, leading her to the back of the house where the kitchen would be. Bold of you to assume we'll have daughters, Thea teased. What if they're all sons? Tucker's expression softened. Then we'll be blessed with boys who have your eyes and spirit. Either way, this house will be filled with love. The day before their wedding, Thea stood in her bedroom in the main house, looking at herself in the full-length mirror. The dress Tilly had helped create was simple but elegant ivory satin with lace at the collar and cuffs, the skirt falling in clean lines to the floor. You look beautiful, Tilly said from the doorway. Like an angel, Thea turned, smiling at her soon-to-be sister-in-law. Thank you. For everything, the dress, the wedding, but most of all for welcoming me from the beginning. Tilly crossed the room and took Thea's hands. From the moment Tucker brought you home, I knew. He looked at you the way our father used to look at our mother, like you were the answer to every question he'd ever asked. Tears pricked Thea's eyes. I never expected this. After my parents died, I thought I was alone in the world except for an uncle I barely knew. Now I have a sister, a home, a future. She swallowed hard, and tomorrow a husband. And someday children to love, Tilly added, squeezing Thea's hands. The Rylan family is growing just as it should. The wedding day dawned clear and cold, the mountains frosted with the first snows of winter. The ceremony was held in the ranch's main house, the large living room transformed with pine boughs, red berries, and white candles. The local minister officiated, and the room was filled with neighbors, friends, and the ranch hands and their families. Thomas Caldwell had arrived the day before to give his niece away, bringing with him a generous wedding gift, a matched pair of thoroughbred yearlings from a renowned Kentucky breeder. For your breeding program, he told them. May they be the foundation of something exceptional, just like your marriage. As Thea walked toward Tucker on her uncle's arm, the gathered guests seemed to fade away. She saw only Tucker, standing tall and handsome in a new black suit, his eyes fixed on her with such love that her heart seemed to swell in her chest. Their vows were simple but profound promises to love, honor, and cherish, to stand together through whatever life might bring, to build a home and family bound by love and respect. With this ring I thee wed, Tucker said, sliding a simple gold band onto her finger to nestle against her engagement ring. With this ring I thee wed, Thea echoed, placing a matching band on his strong hand. What God has joined together, let no man put asunder, the minister pronounced. You may kiss your bride. Tucker gathered her gently in his arms, his kiss tender but filled with promise. The room erupted in cheers and applause. The celebration that followed lasted well into the evening with dancing, feasting, and toasts to the happy couple. As the hour grew late, guests began to depart, each stopping to congratulate the newlyweds one final time. Finally, only family remained: Tilly, Thomas, and the newly married couple. Thomas embraced his niece, then shook Tucker's hand warmly. Take care of each other, he said, his voice gruff with emotion. That's all that really matters in this life. Tilly shooed them toward the stairs with a grin. Go on now, your bags are already packed for your trip to Denver tomorrow. Tonight you have more important things to attend to. Thea blushed furiously, but Tucker merely laughed and scooped her into his arms, carrying her up the stairs to the room that would be theirs until their new home was completed, in the privacy of their bedroom, with candles casting a golden glow over the space. Tucker set her gently on her feet. His eyes were dark with desire, but his touch remained gentle as he helped her remove the pins from her hair, letting it fall in waves around her shoulders. You are so beautiful, he murmured, running his fingers through the silken strands. My wife. My husband, Thea replied, reaching up to touch his face, still hardly believing this man, this good, honorable, loving man, was hers forever. Their first night together was everything Thea had hoped for: tender, passionate, and filled with whispered words of love and promise. In Tucker's arms, the last shadows of her ordeal faded completely, replaced by the certainty that she was exactly where she belonged. The honeymoon journey to Denver was a revelation: fancy hotels, theater performances, restaurants with foods Thea had only read about. But the greatest joy was simply being together, building the foundation of their married life away from the daily demands of the ranch. When they returned 2 weeks later, winter had settled fully over the valley. Their new home's exterior was complete, though the interior would require several more months of work. They settled comfortably into their room in the main house, establishing routines as a married couple within the larger household. Christmas was especially joyous that year, with Thomas visiting again and the house decorated festively. Gifts were exchanged, carols sung around the piano Tilly had insisted on having shipped from St. Louis years earlier, and stories shared late into the night. As they prepared for bed on Christmas night, Tucker presented Thea with one final gift, a small box wrapped in silver paper. "What's this?" she asked, surprised. "You've already given me too much." Earlier, he had presented her with a beautiful leather-bound journal and a fountain pen for recording their horse breeding records. "Open it," he urged. Inside the box was a delicate silver charm in the shape of a horseshoe. "For luck," Tucker explained. "Though I already consider myself the luckiest man alive." Thea kissed him, then went to her drawer and withdrew a package of her own. "I have something for you too, something I've been saving for the right moment." Tucker unwrapped the package to find a small framed drawing, a sketch of their new home as it would look when completed, with smoke curling from the chimney and flowers blooming in window boxes. "It's perfect," he said, studying the detailed rendering. "You've captured it exactly as I imagined." "Look closer," Thea suggested, her heart beating faster. Tucker's brow furrowed as he examined the drawing more carefully. Then his eyes widened as he noticed what she had added: a small figure standing on the porch, a bundle in its arms. His gaze shot to hers, hope and question in his eyes. "Thea." "Are you?" She nodded, her smile radiant. "The doctor in Denver confirmed it. We'll have a baby in early summer." Tucker whooped with joy, lifting her and spinning her around the room before setting her down with sudden concern. "I didn't hurt you, did I, or the baby?" Thea laughed. "We're fine." "Strong as horses," the doctor said. Tucker placed a reverent hand on her still flat stomach. "A child," he whispered. "Our child." "The first of many, I hope," Thea said softly, covering his hand with her own. "Many," Tucker agreed, "enough to fill that house with laughter and love." As they stood together in the quiet of their room, snow falling gently outside the window and the promise of new life growing within her, Thea thought back to that terrible day in Drummond. How close she had come to a life of degradation and despair. How completely her fate had changed because one man had stood up and declared her worth. "What are you thinking?" Tucker asked, noticing her expression. "About how life can change in an instant," she replied. "About how the worst day of my life became the day I found my future." Tucker gathered her close, his arms strong and secure around her. "From the moment I saw you on that auction block, I knew you were special, Thea. I just didn't know how completely you would transform my life." "We transformed each other," Thea corrected gently. "And now we'll transform this child and all the others who follow, teaching them what we've learned: that every life has immeasurable worth, that love can heal even the deepest wounds, and that sometimes the darkest moments lead to the brightest futures." "I love you, Thea Rylan," Tucker murmured against her hair, "with everything I am." "And I love you," she replied, secure in the knowledge that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, partners, lovers, friends. Outside, the snow continued to fall, blanketing the valley in pristine white, covering the past and making way for the future. In the distance, their new home waited, a promise taking shape day by day. And within Thea, new life grew, the ultimate testament to the love they had found against all odds. From auction block to cherished wife, from captive to creator of her own destiny, Thea's journey had been one of darkness transformed to light. Worth his whole life, Tucker had said that day in Drummond. And every day since, they had proven the truth of those words, building a life of purpose, passion, and abiding love in the shadow of the mountains that had witnessed their beginning.